Welcome back, Pedals to Wives. I'm going to give it a moment for everyone to get into the room. I'm just going to check to make sure that the audio and video is working properly. We're going to be talking about where women lose money, love, and power. I want to start with something that I think would be very relieving, that nothing is broken. Most women are not stuck because they lack discipline, intelligence, or spiritual depth. They are stuck because their nervous system exits at specific moments. And when it exits, life slows. Money slows, love slows, momentum collapses, not because desire disappears, but because capacity leaves the body. This conversation is not about mindset, manifestation, or confidence. It's about where women lose momentum and why effort alone doesn't restore it. Women don't lose money, love, or power all at once. They lose it at thresholds, at the moment clarity is required, at the moment visibility increases, at the moment something good arrives, at the moment responsibility stabilizes, at the moment desire deepens, at the moment movement is needed, at the moment they must stand alone. At each threshold, the body either stays or exits, and life responds accordingly. The jaw gate is where authority and money first leak. The first place women lose power is the mouth. Not because they don't speak, but because they negotiate their clarity. This is where women explain prices, soften boundaries, justify decisions, or dilute what needs to be said. Authority weakens at the point of speech. So let me just tell you a little story here. If you've been following me on and reading my YouTube community post, you've probably read that post. But I really want to reiterate that post because it's so important to this conversation. This is where I have to include myself. I was a horrible free coach, not because I didn't care, but because my capacity collapsed. As soon as a client brought in conflict, and I'm talking about more about argumentative or being pushing back just unnecessarily, I would soften. I would avoid saying the thing that needed to be said. I would over explain, reframe, spiritualize, or talk around the truth instead of naming it. I wasn't protecting them, I was protecting my nervous system. And I realized something uncomfortable. I could not charge while I was collapsing at clarity. So I stopped coaching, not to rest, not to rebrand, but to build capacity. I worked on staying regulated when clarity was required, when authority was needed, when truth needed to be clean. Only after that did I begin charging. Money followed clarity, not the other way around. So I'm going to pause it because I know that was a lot, but just to sum that up, when the pressure of conflict came in, I wasn't equipped for that. And so when the conflict got too much for the body, I exited using my patterns. And so that means when I was having these conversations in coaching, I would over explain or spiritualize or try to soften it. And see, the more that I softened it, the more the message got diluted. And so the person would leave with confusion. And so I realized that this is something that I needed to work on before I could ever charge. So I absolutely stepped back and I didn't charge a dime until I started to be able to remain when pressure is happening, when conflict is happening, when I learned to remain and be able to be clear in my communication, clear in my authority, that is when I began to charge. And that's also something you may have seen in other people who are coaching, that they don't, as soon as there's some type of conflict or there's some type of issue, they don't know how to be clear to communicate with you. And they don't know how to be clear. So they collapse, or they over explain, or they just they justify things instead of giving it to you straight. And so I'm going to check in and see what everybody is saying. Hey, Miss Feels Good. Hey, Fuzzy Mustard times 4P. Hello, hello, ladies. Thank you for being here. So I recognize that I had to work on my own capacity to be able to be a good coach, to even charge, because money requires clarity around it. So let's talk about the next gate, which is where visibility collapses. That is the throat gate. The next exit happens at visibility. This is where women pull back once attention increases, go quiet after being seen, disappear when momentum builds. Visibility registers as exposure, so the body retreats. This is why women stop posting, stop leading, stop speaking right when things are working. Life cannot move forward if present collapses under attention. And of course, I've had to step into that to realize, like, I think if you've been here for a while, I've always said something about the algorithm doesn't know me, or my videos aren't being seen. When I realized it really isn't that. That is never the issue. What it was is that once the pressure of visibility increased, I would always exit with my pattern, which was to go into rest, go into hiding, go into silence, go into not making videos, go into, anything that would justify me not being visible. And I had to learn how to remain in it and not exit using my patterns in order to handle the pressure, the weight of visibility, of being seen. I finally catch it alive. But this is a thing that's happening. It's not the algorithm. It is not because you're doing something wrong. A lot of times we're not realizing that the body knows before the mind. So the body exits when it's uncomfortable, where there's discomfort, and we exit using our patterns. And I had to sit with that, practice remaining, because as soon as I realized that something about me personally is that as soon as I get attention, I don't. It's a lot of pressure to have attention. It's a lot of pressure to be visible, and it's something that didn't really truly desire in the first place. And so what happens? I exit. So when I would have a momentum, because I always get the question about, you've been up here for 6 years. Why are you still kind of low in views and low in followers? It's because when I had momentum, and I've had it, I can actually go back through and look at my content and see I've had momentum. I've had exposure. It's just that when it happened and the body felt unsafe, I would exit using my patterns, which means I would go in hiding, I would go in silence, or I would do the number one thing I normally did back then, because as you can tell, if you've been watching, you see I've learned how to remain. I would start to make videos that did not make sense to keep the momentum. I mean, if I'm going to sit here and bring this framework to you ladies, I have to be honest and be willing to stand in the spotlight. So let's talk about where receiving feels unsafe. And this is the heart gate. Women don't struggle with love. They struggle with receiving without repayment. This is where guilt appears after support. Overgiving, begins after success. Joy gets minimized after ease. The body believes receiving creates obligation. So women compensate. They give more, they undo the ease. This is where good things quietly destabilize, not because women don't want them, but because receiving still feels unsafe. So when you're out here and you're on the internet and you're thinking about why women are uncomfortable with receiving, it is because the pressure of receiving creates debt in them. That pressure of someone giving to them, loving them, carrying them, what happens is the body exits and their patterns are revealed. And so they make receiving a debt. That's the reason why you're like, okay, I've done this before. And I think I also wrote a post about this on my community YouTube post about how women, it's not that they don't want love. It is because somewhere along the line, they figured out that the body figured out that receiving was unsafe. And since receiving is unsafe, receiving became a debt. And what happens to a debt? A debt has to be paid back. And so when they are receiving something, they have to give something away also. They have to do something also. They have to give back because receiving feels unsafe. And so all of these conversations, this going back and forth with women, I used to do that too. Until I realized it isn't because they don't want love. It isn't because they don't want to be taken care of. It is because the body feels unsafe. And so they exit using their patterns. And that is a pattern. I totally understand this, and I feel that I have noticed I retreat too. I do what I did. I've learned how to remain. I've learned how to remain instead of exit. And that is the reason why you've seen me show up more than I normally would. Because as soon as the spotlight was on me, as soon as I got momentum, I would exit using my patterns and I would go in hiding. I would go in silence. Or worse yet, I would create a video that had nothing to do with the video that had momentum. But let's get back to the heart gate, which is just the point of location where the body exits and where women use their patterns as a way to exit. They use it as an exit strategy. So let's talk about the solar gate. This is where responsibility burns, momentum down. This gate governs responsibility and authority. Women don't fear success. They fear holding responsibility without collapse. So they interfere, second guess, create chaos, burn down systems that are working. Stability feels exposed. Chaos feels familiar. Power requires remaining, not managing fear. And this is also that I can also relate to, having that, because when it comes to growing social media, or when it comes to, having families, being in love, having more money, these are all connected to responsibility. So when the pressure of responsibility happens, women can sometimes use their patterns as an exit strategy. I know specifically for me, since I have such a history with responsibility due to everything else that's happened with me, I had the tendency to just to burn things down and start all over. Like burn down a community that's grown, because it's requiring a lot more time. It's requiring a lot more responsibility. It's requiring a lot more authority. It's requiring a lot more clarity. And so I would burn it down and I would start all over. And this created chaos. And so a lot of times we're not recognizing that when that pressure is increased, we tend to lean into our patterns to get out of it instead of remaining. Hey, authentic lifeful. Hi. And so responsibility leads to, can be something that is a pressure and create chaos for us. So let's talk about the womb gate. And this is where desire pulls back. This gate governs desire. Women don't fear wanting, they fear losing control over their wants. So desire numbs right before fulfillment. Attraction fades before commitment. Dreams lose energy when they get close. Life slows here because desire is movement, and movement requires trust. I think I've also created a video on this, and this is the reason why we're starting to see that other women are tapping into women not really wanting, because they know that the body has figured out that wanting something can lead to rejection, hurt, and since it's leading to rejection or hurt, it has become numb. And so there's been a lot of content that's playing into that for women. So now it's the content of, hey, you shouldn't want to be married, you shouldn't want to be in love, you shouldn't want kids, you shouldn't want a career, you shouldn't want business, you shouldn't want, because they know that to play into that, to tune and tap into that, that also is a point of concern for women. And the pressure of wanting something will lead to them becoming numb to it. It would lead to them, instead of wanting something, taking on a attitude of, I don't want it because I shouldn't want it, or taking on this thought process that wanting something is bad. And so I'm starting to see a rise of content that's playing into that, because they understand it's a pressure for women. And if they lean into that, it's going to be a moneymaker for them. Because having women not wanting anything, where wanting can't alchemize into desire and move into actually having that thing, it's a moneymaker. And I see this happening in real time. So desire and sovereignty, when we feel, and I think this plays into the conversation that the body knows before the mind. The body recognizes pressure before the mind even registers it. And since the body recognizes pressure, discomfort, uh, the body protects itself. And what happens is you lean into the patterns in order to exit instead of remain. And so let's talk about the next gate, which is the hip gate. And this is where life freezes. When this gate tightens, women don't stop learning, they stop moving. Preparation becomes identity. Readiness becomes a loop. Years pass, opportunities expire. Nothing visibly changes. The hips freeze when change feels unsafe. And I can probably lean into another post that I put up about this, how I've encountered women that the pressure of just change can put women into preparation for years. Just the pressure of wanting to level up, of wanting to have more, of wanting to improve your life, or wanting to improve your looks, or wanting to get an education. Any type of change can put women into preparation for years, because change feels unsafe. So the body goes into protection mode, and women use it as their exit strategy. I've literally had women on my content, or viewing my content, and they'll reach out and say, I'm going to do it eventually. I want to coach with you. I want you to mentor me. I want to, be in the inner throne. I want to be a part of the goddess codes. I want to do this or do that. But they have been saying it for years, because change feels unsafe. There's some discomfort that comes with change. And what happens, instead of getting into what's going to be, in order to remain, to feel that change is safe, They just lean into their patterns and exit. And so they prepare for years. So let's talk about the next gate, which is the feet gate. This is where women wait instead of stand. This gate governs independence and self support. Here, women hesitate. They wait for reassurance. They seek permission, not because they don't know, but because standing alone activates fear. Life slows because ownership hasn't landed. And I used to have a friend back in the day that at this gate, I could tell she would exit it, her patterns would come out. Anytime there was something happening in her life or she was going through something, she literally had what I don't know if y'all understand what a phone tree is. If you're a mother, like as a mother, y'all create a phone tree and it's supposed to be for emergencies. But she had a phone tree to ask for reassurance when she was making decisions or choices. Instead of standing on her own feet and being independent, as soon as the pressure of being independent and making choices and decisions of her own, she would lean into the patterns that come with that. So she would call everybody and ask them, is this something I should be doing? What do you think about this? Is this the right decision? And she would not make a decision. She would not stand in her own decisions and her own independence until she got a clarifying answer. And that happened for years, years. The only reason that I started kind of pushing back and asking her she needs to remain in it and pushing her to kind of stand in her own independence and letting her know that she is supported. She has everything that she needs and she can make the decision that's required. She didn't need a phone tree. She didn't need to call her friends and family to ask them what they think. But I've seen this happen, not just with my friendships, I've seen this happen in the coaching realm. I've seen this happen where the decision is there's so much pressure to be independent and to make a decision that the body feels unsafe. So instead of remaining and making a decision, they exit with their patterns by calling everybody for reassurance or calling everybody to confirm that they're doing the right thing before they do anything. So I'm going to pause here because I know I've said a lot. And if there's any thing that you want to drop in the chat, I'm going to go ahead and interact with you in the chat. But through observation and a decade of coaching and mentoring women, I realized that the patterns that they're displaying is because their body feels unsafe, and they tend to use the patterns as an exit strategy instead of remaining when that pressure is increased. And this can happen whether it is you standing into your authority or clarity or responsibility or leadership. I realize that this kind of applies across the board. I've seen it in myself that when it gets too much and the body feels unsafe, so the body uses a pattern for exit strategy. And I've learned to remain. I practice remaining. I literally practice remaining instead of exiting because I've learned this is one thing that I realized going through this entire process, myself personally, and also coaching and mentoring other women through it, is that life slows where you exit at. Life, like you might want to write this down. Life slows where you exit at. when I was coaching or being a community leader, if I didn't learn to practice remaining, that would not have been an option for me. Well, not a great one, not a active or a coach or community leader with, results. It'd have been just chaos. I want you to think about this whole conversation and apply it to looking at other groups that you've been in. Think about the things that happen in those groups. And a lot of us think it's because of the fact that it's the people. It really isn't the people, it's the community leader. The community leader is the pressure of conflict or the pressure of authority gets to them. Instead of them, you know, facing it head on, they tend to lead in their patterns where they may ignore the conflict, they may ignore the rule breaking, they may ignore all the things that's going in the group, and it creates chaos. So that's another reason why a lot of people don't like groups, because a lot of people that are community leaders, they are not in their authority. They don't, when authority happens for too much pressure, and they fold, they feel unsafe. So they fall back into patterns that is not good for running a group. So if you're like, why is she so strict? Why is she so clear? Why does she stay in her authority when she's running a community? It is because I have learned to remain and not hide away and not exit using my patterns. Remaining present has been something I have been working on, and it's difficult though. Yes, that is the reason why I don't bring up conversation unless I become embodied in it. Because I know that I have to be embodied and have a clear understanding to be able to help women to remain. And that is so important instead of using your patterns. Because what happens, we're not realizing the other side of that coin is that life slows down. So you don't get the movement of becoming or standing in authority or standing in your power or having more money or having more success or having more leadership. You don't get that movement because you're stalled, because you're exiting every time that pressure comes about. And I realized this. I want to be a great coach. I want to be a great community leader. I didn't want to be someone who was just, I mean, I know that this exists. People do exist that just take from other people and they don't care if they deliver, but that's not a part of my value system. I actually care that I'm delivering, that I'm being a great coach, and I'm being a great community leader. And so I knew that I had to remain instead of flee, instead of exit, instead of leaving when I'm under pressure. It wasn't easy, but it can become easy. And all of the things I used to go back and forth with women, having this clarity around this framework, I realized that I was asking something of women that they weren't able to deliver. And it's not because they were horrible people. It's not because they didn't have a good value system. It's not because they're not, you know, it's not because they are too nice, because we like to label people as if women are not able to do this, they're too nice, or they don't have standards, or they don't have a value system. That isn't it. You cannot, when the body feels unsafe or uncomfortable or discomfort, if you haven't learned how to remain, if you haven't practiced to remain, you're just going to fall into patterns in order to exit. And so when I was asking women to just say it, and they physically couldn't, they physically couldn't say no. They physically couldn't uh, say the thing and be straightforward. They physically can't, because some parts of that feels unsafe to them. And since they feel unsafe, they fall into patterns where they're vague. They fall into patterns where they have to lie. They fall into patterns where they have to soften their words because the pressure is too much. And the body does what the body needs to do. The body protects you. That's what the body does. And it's very good at its job. But you don't need to be fixed. Like, don't waste time and money trying to fix something that isn't broken. You're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. You just have to learn how to remain. You don't need another strategy. You don't need to push where your body learned to exit. Money, love, and power don't disappear. They pause at the exact point where capacity leaves. Some women will leave this live and try to think their way through this. Others will recognize that what's missing isn't information, but a place to practice remaining. That's where the inner throne exists for. Not to motivate you, not to fix you, not to promise transformation, just to hold the practice of staying where the nervous system used to leave. If you don't need that, you don't need it. If you do, you'll know. So I wasn't even going to like make this a super long video. I just wanted to do a live stream with you all and have this a conversation because I've already been posting this on my YouTube community posts. If you're not following them, I encourage you to follow them. I believe they give a lot of added value to this conversation because a lot of the things that you're wanting other women to have, and not only yourself, a lot of it is just physically impossible. They're leaving or exiting when they're when they're uncomfortable. And we tend to use our patterns to exit instead of remain. So I'm going to leave the chat open for a few minutes or a few seconds or so in order to see if anybody has anything you want to add or any questions that they want to put out there. You can go ahead and drop them in the chat. But I deliberately really wanted this to be a short video because this is something that has really been in the forefront of a lot of the posts and conversations I've been having within my school community and on my YouTube community post. A lot of us, we need to realize the things that we're seeing not only in ourselves and other women is we need to realize that the pressure that they are under and they are reacting to that and they're doing it through their patterns. And it's not because they see themselves as less than, or they don't value themselves, or they don't have any standards, or all these things, or blocks, or they have mother and father wounds. All these things, there is just noise. It is not the thing that's going to help them learn to remain when they are under pressure and their body feels unsafe. Thank you. Definitely sitting with this one. Yes, that's the reason why I said I did not want this video to be super long. But I'm going to get ready to go ahead and close us out. I appreciate you ladies for coming and being with me all the way to the end. Thank you, Pedestal Wise, for your support. And I will see you all on the next video. Bye.